So, you know that meme of like, you think of a joke and you think it's pretty good? You kind of test it out with your friends and you don't go overboard with it. And you're like, you know what? I think it's a pretty good joke. But then one of your friends takes the meme, turns it into like a worse version of itself, and he goes and broadcasts it to the rest of the class. And then he gets all the credit for like the sick meme. That's kind of what for-profit insurance did. So once upon a time, people got sick, and what would happen is, when you got sick, sometimes you died, and people didn't want to die, and so what they did was they started going to these people called doctors, and doctors really wanted to help, but it takes a really long time to learn how to be a doctor, and then it's pretty costly to set up the process of becoming a doctor, because it turns out like doctors use equipment and stuff, and it turns out that equipment like costs money or whatever. So like they were like, hey, this stuff costs money and it takes time, and that's time that like we can't be working for a living, and you have to work in order to make money. And so they were like, okay, so we're going to start charging money to be doctors, because there's no way we can be doctors otherwise. And so that's kind of what they did. But the problem was that it cost a lot of money to be a doctor, so when you got sick... So yeah, they started charging money that, would help them not go broke trying to help people, and labor theory of value, dude. The problem with doctors basically charging so they wouldn't go broke was that now medicine costs a lot of money, because turns out the equipment's pretty expensive. All that time you spend learning to become a doctor, pretty expensive. At the very least in terms of opportunity cost, but definitely beyond that. And what would happen is, most people would be fine. And then one day you would get sick, you'd have to go to the doctor, and you'd have to get like a really expensive like operation or procedure or surgery. And it would be really expensive. And it was basically like, it was like a negative lottery ticket, essentially. And there would be someone in the town, someone would just be doing fine, and then... Sorry. And then someone in the town would just suddenly get sick, and then they'd be the one to have to foot the entire bill for their recovery, and it was just like, if you were the unlucky one, you were the unlucky one, right? And that felt really crummy. One can only imagine that was a pretty yikesy situation to be in. So what a couple people had the idea for was, hey, we don't think anyone should, have to face financial ruin. Now, I personally don't want to risk facing financial ruin. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, everyone in a certain community, 30, 50, 100, 200 people, and what we're all going to do is we're all going to pay a little bit of money every week or every month into a fund. And what's going to happen is that fund is going to be available to whoever winds up needing medical care. So you would put a little money into the fund, and slowly but surely that fund would grow, and then someone would need medical attention, and they'd withdraw from that fund. And the amount that you paid to that fund was entirely based off how much money had been withdrawn from it, say, the previous year. The amount that was paid by each person was just the total cost of that fund from the previous year divided by the number of people in the fund, right? So it didn't matter like how much money you'd withdrawn the previous year, what your risk level was. It was considered basically like a veil of a shroud of ignorance, like a Rawlsian, is it Rawls? A shroud of ignorance principle on how much money each person had to give. It was just like, we're just going to charge everyone the same thing. This isn't for profit. It's just to make sure that nobody faces financial ruin because they were just less lucky than the other person, right? and it was considered fairness. It was considered a function of fairness, and just like, just to make sure that everyone had a certain level of security, that nobody faced, a ridiculous amount of pain because of things that were beyond their control. So this company was nonprofit. There were people in those funds who were at higher risks for diseases than others, at lower risks for diseases, and the people at lower risk could, I'm sure some people who had lower levels of risk were like, hey, I have a lower level of risk, why do I have to pay so much? And Blue Cross and Blue Shield were like, this isn't a for-profit institution. We're not trying to get you a good deal. What we are trying to do is make sure that everybody is, safe from financial ruin because of healthcare costs. So this is the rate we're going to charge you. It's based on the total cost of healthcare divided by the number of people in the fund. And that's how it's going to be. And then came along capitalism, basically. So yeah. Then capitalism came along and people were like, wait a second. Someone was like, if I only get the people that are very unlikely to need that fund, I can charge them less to get them to come to me, but I can charge them enough that I'm making a profit on it. So you know that meme of like when you're in high school and you think of a joke and you think it's pretty good, but you're not quite sure. So what you do is you kind of test it out with your friends and you don't go overboard with it, and you're like, you know what, I think it's a pretty good joke, and you kind of enjoy it among your friends, but you don't want to you also don't want to share it with the whole class. It doesn't feel like, you don't want necessarily, you don't want to ruin the meme. You don't want it to become like super mainstream, and you're like, I think it's a pretty good meme. I'd like to enjoy it with just my friends. But then one of your friends takes the meme, turns it into like a worse version of itself, and his delivery is like completely messed up, and he goes and broadcasts it to the rest of the class. And then he gets all the credit for like the sick meme. And if you try and say, hey, no, that meme was actually mine, like everyone's like, dude, why are you desperate for attention? That's kind of what for-profit insurance did to Blue Cross Blue Shield. They basically took this idea, they only applied it to low-risk individuals, and they basically said, we're going to offer the same thing, but for $3 less per week or per month, and we're only going to offer it to people at this level of risk. So everyone at that level of risk was like, whoa, I can save $3 a week on my health insurance, and my level of safety changes absolutely zero. So I'm saving $3 a week. Sweet. So you start hopping over to these companies, and then Blue Cross Blue Shield is left with the same policy, but all of their people are in a very high risk pool. So before, let's say their operating costs, their healthcare claim costs were, let's say they were $2,000 per month, and there were 200 people in the fund. So it cost $10 a month per person. They charge $10 a month per person. Now suddenly their operating costs are down to $1,500 a month, but instead of 200 people, now they have like 75 people, right? Suddenly their operating costs are $20 a month, and they have to double their prices. They have to double their fees in order to make ends meet. So let's say you're in that situation. What do you do? If you're insured by one of those companies, slowly you're gonna start saying, you know what, I don't want to pay $20 a month. It's just not, the risk is not high enough, or it's not worth it. The amount of financial stress that puts on me, So that's basically what happened, was that like essentially the original scheme of private insurance was basically what Medicare for All is supposed to be. But the problem was it was a private scheme. So private schemes are corruptible by profit interests. And that ultimately wound up being the downfall, so to speak, of Blue Cross Blue Shield in its then form. But then what happened was they were just like, hey, we can't survive this way. And they turned into a for-profit business, and they started price discriminating as well. And then everything turned out okay for the private insurance companies. Not really for anyone else, but... All right, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video. I'm going to be doing daily content on the global far right, on healthcare, on all sorts of issues. And if you want to join the discussion live, I stream to Twitch every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So feel free to tune in there. Otherwise, new content every day. Have a great day.